Hey listeners, it's Jana. Welcome back to Grief Out Loud. When a child dies, everything changes. Who you are as a parent, a partner, as a family, it all shifts into something unfamiliar. For Susie and Nick Shaw, that shift came on a winter day in Big Sky, Montana, when their 9-year-old son William, a careful, joyful, and deeply empathetic child, died in a ski accident. In the years since, Susie and Nick have found their own ways of grieving, separately and together, alongside their middle son Kai and their youngest, Bodhi, who was born after William died. They've created rituals and worked to bring William's legacy into the world through their nonprofit, William's Be Yourself Challenge. In this conversation, we talk about what it means to grieve as individuals within a family, the pain of guilt, the work of staying connected, and how they're creating space, literally, for other families who are grieving through a new project called The Greenhouse. Quick note, listeners, this episode includes descriptions of the day William died, so please take care while listening. Okay, here's our conversation. Susie, Nick, welcome to Grief Out Loud.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you so much. We're so happy to be here.
I'm curious what you each want to share with us about your son, William. And Nick, do you want to start us off?
Sure. He was a special little boy. I've talked a lot about this um, as I talk about him. I always say that he was a really empathetic, caring, sensitive little boy. He knew how to connect with people at that level, even at a young age. People often said that he was an old soul after he died. And he really just had that sense about him where he just could feel what someone else was feeling and then would show up for them and however they needed him to show up for them. I often say, or I believe that we didn't just lose William, the world lost William because we need more of those types of people in this crazy time. Yeah, he was loving, caring, funny, active, adventurous. He was just a beautiful little boy.
Do you get the sense that his kind of innate empathy came from one or both of you, or is that something he brought into this world on his own?
Probably didn't come from me. I mean, it more likely came from my wife, but I think, he just had that natural way about him. Maybe that was an innate personality trait. I've learned how to be more empathetic as a result of William's death. So I'll give most of the credit to Susie on that one.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, sweetheart. And I think it was innate. I just think that's who he was. William was my first child. He made me a mother. We sort of did it together, right? We made a lot of mistakes together and we had a lot of successes together. Like if I really think about it, like he was my best friend. He was just my little sidekick. For the first 2 years of his life, it was just me and him. Nick would be at work and we were in a new city at the time. And so I didn't have a ton of friends and we didn't have family around. So we just did everything together. Yeah, he was my little ray of sunshine. He had big, beautiful, blonde, curly hair. He was so spunky. Everybody loved him. He was just such a sweet kid. He was the kid that, if a new kid came into school, they would place him next to William in the classroom because William was sort of like somebody who would show them the ropes. And he was sort of that model classroom helper. People just were drawn to him. And he was drawn to people. He loved to sit on the buddy bench or go up to the buddy bench at school if kids were sitting on the buddy bench, which means you kind of need a partner or somebody to play with. William would be that guy to go over and play with them. He was just a sweet, sweet boy.
Seems like this leads into then I was going to ask about the meaning behind the name of your organization, William's Be Yourself Challenge. And I feel like I'm already getting a little sense of that, but wondered what else you might share about that particular phrase.
So when William was 8 years old, they were doing a lesson at our church. It's the Unitarian church. And so they learn about all different types of religion. And they were doing a lesson on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. And all the kids had to write down a mantra for the next year for themselves. And William wrote on his little note card for his mantra, be yourself. At 8 years old, he was already thinking about how important it was for him to sort of find his true spirit. After he died, the religious education teacher, her name's Pam, she's just amazing. She gave that note card to us. My sister-in-law saw it after the funeral. Actually, no, excuse me, before the funeral, and then decided to make bracelets for the funeral that said "Be yourself" on them. Because again, we all sort of thought that William embodied the "be yourself" idea. A few years later, when we formed our nonprofit, somebody decided that we should really want to honor that aspect of William, of being himself. So the idea was sort of, let's challenge our community, our friends, our family to be themselves, just like William did.
Susie, you touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious, what did it mean to each of you to become a parent to William? Like, how did his arrival change you?
Well, like I said, I mean, it was a lot, like as most first time parents understand. There's no handbook when you have the baby. They just sort of like deliver it, and then they leave you in the room, and you don't get a whole lot of instructions as to what to do. It was really overwhelming, and every time he sneezed or coughed, you thought the world was ending. So there was some anxiety for sure in those initial months and even years, about trying to be a good parent, to protect him, to make the right choices. And so yeah, I found it overwhelming, and also the best thing that I could have possibly done. Nick, do you want to speak to how you felt as a new parent?
Absolutely. It's overwhelming to say the least. Everyone tells you your life's going to change after you have your first child, but you don't know until you're holding that little being in your arms for the first time. And I would say for me, it's a type of love that is so different than any other type of love that we experience. Love for your spouse, love for your own parents or siblings. This is half you, half your spouse. And the love is so visceral, right? It's at a level so deep and innate. So that to me was quite significant. Also, for me, you have to learn how to be quite selfless. You have to learn how to prioritize another being over yourself, probably for the first time in your life in a very real way, because they can't survive without you. So I think those two elements for me were the biggest aha moments for me.
Can I just, Nick, you decided to change your career after we had William.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Thank you. It's a good reminder, actually. Yeah, so I'd been in a career that I didn't love. I kind of went into it because I was kind of trying to do what my dad did, because I thought I should do that. And I was kind of miserable. Susie can attest to that. I was quite grumpy and complained a lot about the work I was doing. And then so when William was born, I kind of had this sort of notion that this has to stop, because as a father to a boy, that my son is not going to look to me for what it means to be a man. And I didn't want to model for him that you should do anything other than what you're inspired or passionate about. And so that was the final sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, off of years of just frustration. I finally decided to just take a leap of faith and transition into a new career.
In a way, like William's arrival already inspired a bit of that be yourself. It seems like with your career.
Absolutely.
Like I need to find something that's more true to who I am so that I can model that to this son of mine.
Gosh, I never thought about that. No.
And that was the first lesson he taught me, which is what inspired. That was, I realized he'd been teaching me since the day he was born.
Hence your book title, My Teacher, My Son.
Yes, exactly.
So you both spoke to that sort of visceral connection of wanting to like feeling kind of vigilant towards his safety or wanting to protect him, and that just deep, deep love and care and responsibility. And so I wonder about the day that William died. Susie, I know you've talked about it across different platforms. Nick, I'm guessing you've written about it and talked about it in different platforms. There's so much to say, but what would you each want to say about that day today in this moment?
I will start. Nick and I have spoken together about this. There's nothing we did that day that we wouldn't do over again. We don't feel like there was anything that we could have controlled and had a different outcome. And it took a long time to get to that place, but William was an excellent. William died skiing. He was an excellent skier. He had been on skis since he was 2 or 3. He took lessons every time we skied together. He was on a racing team near our house. He had the best equipment. He was a very thoughtful skier. He didn't bomb down the mountain like some kids his age do. He was very meticulous about proper form, and he loved it so much. He took it really seriously. And my husband is an amazing skier as well. So it's not like we were out there being reckless. Nick made all the right choices that day when he was skiing with William, and they had just come from skiing the hardest part of the mountain. And William had crushed it, at the top. Lone Peak in Big Sky, Montana is known to be, an expert trail. And he did that. And then he died on the way down on a very easy trail. So what we've learned about, life in general and having children is, we aren't in control nearly as much as we think we are. We think we can make sure our children are safe. And we did the best that we could. We made all the right choices, and he still died that day. We really have to work to learn to accept that.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Susie said. I think it is quite an eye-opening, or it was quite an eye-opening experience for us around this notion of control, in the fact that we really don't have much of it. You can try to do everything right, and there will still be forces beyond our control that might cause an outcome like the one we had to face happen. I think it also speaks to the fragility and brevity of life. William was with me because I was with him when it happened. He was with me and then he wasn't. It was that fast. I mean, he was 10 feet behind me. We were, literally 2 to 3 minutes from the bottom of the mountain where we are going to meet up with Susie and our younger son Kai. And then all of a sudden he wasn't there. It's a blink of an eye of how quickly you can lose somebody. And it makes you appreciate that this is it. This is the one life we have that we know of anyway. For me and even for Susie, it causes us to look at our own lives and say, well, that could happen to any of us at any moment. So what does that mean for how we should live our lives?
I'm recognizing that we're talking about this, 6 years later. And I can imagine year 1, year 2, perhaps not being in that place of we made all the right decisions. This is out of our control. And I'm just curious if you could each speak to a little bit of what that was like, that reckoning or the ruminating that maybe can happen.
Yeah, I can start. It was because I was with him. I carried a lot of guilt with me for a long time because you like to think you again, and this even after realizing that you don't have a lot of control, you still like to think that you might have had more control, or like to think that you might have done something that would have prevented the accident. So a lot of torture or self-torture, a lot of rumination, going down the vicious spiral of negative thoughts and coulda, shoulda, wouldas, and a lot of uncertainty. I would say in those early days, weeks, months, even years of grief, you don't know what the other side looks like, and it's like you're staring into this darkness, and you don't see the other side. So it takes time, and that I think everyone has to go through that. I don't think there's any way to go around that. You have to go through it, grappling with those kinds of thoughts, whatever guilty thoughts or other thoughts you may have. That I think that's just part of the process.
I think it's so helpful to share that piece of like, there's not really a shortcut to that place of this was out of my control and I did everything I could in the moment. And yet also to be here 6 years later to say there's a possibility you might get to a place if you're
Hmm.
sitting in that spot of grief and regret and wondering and grappling with that lack of control. Like there's an option here,
Hmm.
but not that you're going to leapfrog over there after day two.
And I have to say that it has taken and still will take so much work and effort to be able to get to this place 6 years later where we have when we can look back and say, we tried to do our best, and it was out of our control. We immediately all started seeing our own individual therapists. We had a family therapist right out of the gate, for me, Nick, and Kai, our surviving son, to go to. We started going to a family support group right away, and we still go. I bring Kai there, and I bring my now 5-year-old son, who we had after William died. So we continue to do the work. We did it immediately after William died, and we do it now because grief is so heavy and so hard. And we really recognize that we couldn't do it alone. We didn't want to do it alone. And it's been so helpful for us to sit with other families who have lost children, to share experiences, kind of get advice, but it's more, again, the sharing of stories and how did you do this and what did that look like for you? The modeling of seeing families who are 5, 6 years out was critical for us at the beginning to sort of give us that glimmer of hope, like, oh, maybe Kai will be able to graduate high school, even though his brother died. Because I'm witnessing another family who's at that point, whose child had died, 5 years previously. So it has been a lot of work, and dedicating ourselves to doing that work. Because, like Nick said, the first year or two after William died, for me, it was so dark. I didn't know how I would live without one of my children. I truly didn't understand how I could move forward with one huge part of my existence just gone, without any warning. I I wanted to show up for Kai, my surviving child, and it was so hard. One thing that did really help us too in the initial months was we were privileged enough that Nick was able to take 6 months off of work, which is unbelievably rare in bereavement. That the three of us got to spend 6 months uninterrupted together to share new experiences, to cry together or separately if we needed to, and to just walk through those first 6 months together. And that ended up creating space for our family to decide to have another child. I mentioned earlier my now almost 5-year-old Bodhi. And I think that the addition of Bodhi also really gave us some hope
Hmm.
after a loss. If you're a griever, you know that, like, adding another child is not, a fix by any means. Like, we weren't trying to, this wasn't a replacement, but it was putting all of our love for William and for our family into something bigger than ourselves. That really helped the trajectory of our family going forward too. But that has been a real challenge too, just to have to go back, to that infancy, the toddler phase. We were done having children after we had our second son, and William died when Kai was 6.5. So to go back into that early stage, with a child, that was really hard. As wonderful as it has been, it's also been a challenge.
I was just thinking about the sheer physical exhaustion of grieving. And then to add an infant back in, which from what I've heard brings sheer physical exhaustion as well. So doubling that up.
It was exhausting, and Bodhi was born at the height of the pandemic as well. And so we didn't have any support people, because he was also born with a lung defect. And so we couldn't risk him getting COVID. So it was exhausting. And it also sort of made us all really bond and gel because we were the only people that we could see. So there was something quite unique about that experience.
we were in our 40s. I think I was 44 when William died, and Susie was 41. So we didn't have a lot of time to wait and think about having another child, which is one of the reasons yeah, we were still full grief mode and pregnant, which was an interesting time in our lives.
I was just thinking about that idea of like being in the height of the COVID pandemic, the isolation that came with that, but then also thinking you were on vacation when William died, all the way basically across the country from friends and family. It's a very unique aspect of your story. And I just wondered if you could speak a bit to what that was like for you.
It was, I mean, so we came back the very next day. We realized, so we spent, he was pronounced dead at towards the end of the day, maybe 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening of I think it was a Tuesday. Um, and eventually we made it. We went back to the cabin that we had rented for the week, and it was hell. I mean, it was just like it was a cabin that literally a day before was warm and cozy and filled with laughter and fun and excitement to literally hell. It was tiny. The walls are closing in on us. We just had this deep need to get the hell out of Montana. And I'll be honest, I was worthless because I was so in shock and bereft with guilt and all kinds of other horrible thoughts. Susie sort of managed all of that, and we just said we're going to get out of here. We packed up that evening, didn't sleep much. We were able to find ourselves a flight, and we just got home to some notion of comfort or something we were familiar with, which is home.
Yeah, we felt so unsafe in Montana. It felt like somebody else was going to die if we stayed. There was another family that was from our town vacationing. We didn't go together, but we sort of realized right before we left that we were all going to be there together. So we were skiing with them. And it was actually the dad in that family who was the one who found William, because William was missing for a few hours. That dad, his name is Matt. He is a paramedic and a firefighter, and none of the ski patrol could find William, but Matt somehow found him. So that family was helpful to us, and also we we sort of just needed to be alone in that hell for a minute, or when you don't know what you need when something so horrendous happens. And so they asked us to, I remember they asked us to stay with them that night, and we're like, no, no, we're gonna go back to our place. And just because again, we had no idea what had just happened, and neither did they. They were in shock as well. So they didn't have the wherewithal to say, no, you must stay here. So we went back to our cabin. We didn't sleep at all, Nick, actually. No one slept. Kai, excuse me, Kai did sleep. We put him to bed, but I packed all of our things up. I was on the phone with the airlines getting our flight. Matt, our friend, did drive us to the airport the next morning, but it was like that flight response that we had. We just needed to get out. It felt so scary to be in Montana. And we flew, and we did have a few friends from back east from home say, tell me where you are, like what airport do we need to fly into? We're going to come and get you. And we just sort of said, no, 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 we'll make it. Again, we didn't know what we needed. It would probably have been a lot more helpful to have had our people come, but we just were adamant, like we've got to exit Montana. This place is going to swallow us whole. And looking back, I actually regret what we did, to be honest, because we just sort of left William there. He was dead, and so there was nothing we could do. But I wish I had accompanied him to the morgue and to the funeral home out there. But again, we were so confused, and there was nobody there to tell us or to advise us on what steps we could have or should have taken. And so we made the decision to just leave. And, there were a lot of questions that came up years later that I realized I wanted to have answered. And it was too late. but it was just so harrowing to be there and to have lost William and to just, we were so confused, and home felt safer. And, my brother picked us up from the airport. The rest of my family was back at our house in Carlisle. And we did arrive into that sort of cocoon of support and love immediately. So at the time, it was the right decision. But you don't know what the right decision is, in those
Yeah.
moments of the trauma and post death. So confusing.
And there's really no decision that's going to encompass all of the things that you either needed in the moment or retrospectively looking back to think, oh, I really could have needed this, or I wanted to stay in the same town where his body was, or that's not like available in the moment.
Right,
And there's no
right.
decision that's going to hit all those points, really.
Right. And there was no, the mountain didn't have a social worker on staff to sort of walk us through how we could think about what had just happened to us, right? They were lovely people and they weren't trained in this. They didn't know what to do either. I don't know how many deaths have happened at Big Sky, but certainly not a lot of children have died.
Yeah. Well, there's no playbook, right? I mean, that's the thing, and every family needs something different, and so it's hard to how do you figure out what all the possible things that a family could need. I think we went on instinct, and sure we can question it years later, but in that moment, I think that's what we needed. We just it's so disorienting. Like your life is literally turned upside down, right? You know, um, nothing is normal. You're in a state of numbness, of shock. You barely feel human. So yeah, you need something to ground you, and Montana wasn't it.
And you're talking about, just being ungrounded. I remember so vividly, like from the moment Nick called me to ask me if I knew where William was, it was like I was looking from above at everything that transpired in the next 24 hours. Like I wasn't seeing the world through my eyes. It was like I was above, and I now know that that's a trauma response. I mean, I'm sure many grievers know what I'm talking about. But everything was happening not to me, but like above me or outside of my body. And it was so disorienting. Nothing really felt even real, because I wasn't actually experiencing it yet. I was in that state of profound shock. We needed those people around us to like hold us again in order to sort of come back into our body. I felt that the huge need to protect Kai, the child who was left. And like I said before, I thought someone else would die in Montana and it would probably be him, right? We needed to just flee, and we fled.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for you both that I don't think I've ever asked anyone. So let me see if I
Mm,
can get the wording right around
okay.
it. But I was thinking about how, as a parent or any relationship we have with folks, where we have these sort of like magnetized places of routine and familiarity, like the thing we always did with this person on this time of day. And I wonder for each of you if you can think back to a routine that you had with William that your body and your spirit were still looking to do when you got home to the East
Hmm.
Coast.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, the one that comes to my mind is I would always do this little funny game with him. I would like poke my head into his room and say, "Hey, William, how you doing? You everything okay?" And he'd say, "Yeah." And he'd be sitting on his bed, and I'd close the door, and I would repeat that two or three times just to kind of mess around with him. And he got a chuckle out of it. And so I think the first one was for me was when we got back to our home in Massachusetts, going into that room and hoping to see him,
Hmm.
opening that door and seeing his smiling face on his bed there where I'd always seen it. That was the one for me that sort of that little routine, that little joking around game we used to play. That's the one that kind of and you look in that room and it's void of the life that once was there. And it's crazy because when we left for Montana. to go there. We got up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, so we had to catch an early flight. So his bed was still unmade. Everything was just kind of left there like in a time capsule, um, preserved, except for him, obviously. So that was hard, right? To go into that room and know that he'll never occupy that room in a physical form ever again.
To open that door and not see his face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny, one of the first, maybe the first night we got home, I wanted to sleep in his bed, but then I didn't because I didn't want Kai to think that I loved William more than him. You know what I, like I didn't want him to feel left out. Like, well, why isn't mom sleeping with me? Like, like I'm still here. So it was this battle of like, well, what's the right choice and who do I need to serve? Me or me, my feelings of wanting to be closer to my dead son or Kai. I didn't want him to feel left out or neglected. There was a lot of that at the beginning. It's like how to manage both of my children, one being dead and one being alive. But one thing that, I always did with William is we would hold hands and we were both kind of anxious people. He had a lot of anxiety and I do too. And we would do like a triple squeeze if we were sort of wanting to just say, hey, checking in, but it also meant like, I love you, 1, 2, 3. I didn't I didn't have that anymore. And now it's nice. I do it with Kai and I'm starting to do it with Bodhi. But it was a thing between me and William and it sort of calmed us both down. I missed that.
I'm having this image of your hand outstretched and just squeezing
Yeah, I love you.
into the air.
I still do. I still squeeze when I think about it. Like if I'm walking or like like sometimes I'll just squeeze the air, pretending or imagining that I'm doing it to him. Yeah, I love you.
Well, you've led us to the part where we wanted to talk about how, there's the saying, right? Grief is different for everyone. And sometimes you're in a family and then people
Yeah.
are grieving very differently in the family. And Susie, you already alluded to this of like your grief in a way could never be just yours because you were always already thinking, how is this impacting Kai? How is my grief response going to impact my child? And could you each talk a little bit about like, what did you need individually? How did that impact you as a couple, as a family? I mean, that could be the whole interview, but we'll just start where we start.
Yeah, I'll start on this one, and Nick has a lot to say because we've spoken about this before, but we realized fairly early on that we had very different grieving styles. I'm very outward in my grief. I cry openly with other people, and I'm okay with that. I also really like to talk through my grief and share with other people. I found it very, important to cry in front of Kai as well. I wouldn't do the gigantic breakdowns when I would get like almost really, really scary because I didn't want to frighten him. But I heard early on, I was told early on by professionals like it's okay to let them see you cry. That means that then they'll know that you love them too. And so I was very confident in showing my emotions in front of Kai. I thought it was really important. It was interesting, and there most of the time, especially for that first year of grieving, we were lucky in the fact that it seemed like we all took turns in having bad moments or bad days, which really I think helped us support one another. So if Nick was having a really hard day, I seemed to be able to step up and either help him or take on the responsibilities of the parenting or the laundry, whatever the day needed. And he did the same for me. Like, oh, Susie's having, a hard day today. Like I'm capable of carrying the family today. And there was this one moment that I remember it was Christmas Eve or maybe the day before. So William died in February, and that first Christmas, it was awful, of course. And his birthday is on December 20th, so it was his the first birthday without him, and we had decided to go away. We didn't want to spend the holiday with extended family, and we on New Year's Eve or Christmas Eve, we all were having a bad day, like for the first time that I can remember, and we all got in fights that day. It was just horrible. But prior to that, I feel like we all understood that we were grieving differently, that we needed space, and we gave each other space. Nick, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, happy to. Yes, we do grieve very differently. I'm probably the exact opposite of Susie. I'm very introspective. I'm an introvert. So for me, I fled into my home office and spent time with myself, thinking first and then eventually finding ways to connect with my emotions. And so it's not that I wouldn't cry, but it wasn't something that was easily accessible for me, at least initially. So I thought I was failing at grief. I tell you, for the first like 3, 4, 5 months, I didn't know what the hell was wrong with me because I didn't seem to be. I just didn't know. I'd never done it before. I didn't know how it was done. I read all the books, which frame it in a certain linear way, which didn't seem to be the way I was doing it. And it was only later that I realized my way of doing it was my way of doing it, which was to sit in my office, to meditate, to process, to just be alone. But that took a while for me to realize that. I think it really is important for families to realize that there is no one way to do it, and you have to give each member of that family their own space to do it in their own way. I think that was super helpful for us to enable us to come through this thing intact as a family. And I will say, we were going to do whatever it took to allow ourselves to stay intact as a family because, Susie and I, you hear the horror stories about this can tear families apart, divorce, and all kinds of other horrible things can happen. And we were just hell bent on not letting that happen. So we were going to do whatever it took. So if she was doing it differently, that was fine. I was just going to trust that that was her way, and she did the same for me. And yeah, and it's interesting because talking about how we grieve differently, there's a very, very vivid moment that happened where we realized that Kai was going to do it differently than us. So it was probably the week after William died, we were getting ready to plan, the funeral, the obituary, all that logistical stuff. And we needed a picture of William. So I think I gave my phone to somebody because we could not look at pictures. Susie and I were like, it's way too painful. We can't do it. And so I gave somebody my phone to find a picture. And then somehow the phone got into Kai's hand. And I remember we saw Kai with the phone, and our immediate reaction was, get that phone away from him. That's going to be too painful for him. And we went up to him, and he had this huge smile on his face as he was scrolling through pictures of his brother. So picture this, a 6-year-old kid scrolling through the phone, and that was his way, right? And so like he was a role model for us, right? It's okay to look at a picture of my brother, and that's what I need. So I have to say he helped us tremendously.
And at first, like, Kai's probably only cried like 5 times since William died, literally in 6 years. And I thought something was wrong with him too. Like, I had to learn that not everybody cries heavily in their grief. It took some understanding and some education on my part to learn that Kai does it his own way, and Kai carries William in his own way. But we also learned that doing things as a family to remember William is really important, and to institute those rituals to keep him alive in our family. That's become really important. Like, every William died on February 19th, so every 19th of the month we have a taco dinner because that was William's favorite, and we light a candle and we say his name, right? And that's it's we do lots of things to remember William, but that's one specific thing that we do as a family to make sure that we're like unified in our remembering, and it brings us together.
I'm appreciating what you were saying, Susie, of having that ritual on the 19th, and it's the same one each time. Because I think a lot of times families struggle with each anniversary or each birthday, like coming up with something to do. And so I'm appreciating that opportunity of like, it can just be the same thing that you do each time. And there's that predictability and a little bit less of that decision making that has to go into it or negotiating as a family.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a really powerful moment for us. And even if we're not together, um,
Hmm.
which happens, Nick's traveling or there's an activity like we either like have a breakfast taco or Nick finds a taqueria to go to and so it's it's just a really special way for us to all stay connected around William. And like you said, it's easy. We don't have to think about it.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Consistency is your friend on this one, right? Like if it works, just do it over and over and over again. We have developed all kinds of rituals. The 19th, we do Dia de los Muertos every November 1st. We celebrate his birthday. We get him a present. We get him a cake. I mean, it's very consistent. We have a very consistent way of honoring and remembering him, and I mean that works for us. I mean, if so yeah. But don't feel like you have to, rewrite the book every time.
I'm curious how has it worked for you all of bringing William into Bodhi's life, your child who was born after William died?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's quite a fascinating thing if you think about it. You have this Bodhi was born into a house where the concept of death existed the day he was born, and in the reality, he was only born because his brother died because we were done having kids. Like that, the plan was two, done, finished, and he's since the day he could sort of think and talk, and he's always known that there is this presence person called William in our life, but he's never seen him other than pictures. I mean, even when he was like 1 year old, 2 year old, the first thing we'd do in the morning, we'd get him up from his when he was would awaken, would take him to a picture of William and give the picture a kiss. Um, so it's because we want him to know William, right? So we are extra intentional about talking about William because we want Bodhi to know William. We have to teach Bodhi about William. Kai teaches Bodhi about William. So um, it's a really fascinating part of this story, that whole dynamic and getting a now almost 5 year old to understand what
Mm.
has happened to this family.
Yeah, and there's a lot of beautiful moments. There's a lot of challenges for sure. Like 2 days ago, we had a friend here, and she was another 5-year-old girl, and Bodhi and she were talking in the hallway. They were looking at a picture of our before family.
Mm.
It was a picture of me and Nick and William and Kai, and the little girl was like, "Who's that person? I know the others, but who's that?" And Bodhi's like, "Well, that's my brother William."
Mm.
I've never met him. She's like, what do you mean you? I was overhearing this. Like, what do you mean you've never met him? He's like, oh, well, he died before I was born. I've never seen him. And so he's like, he has this language to tell his little friend that his brother died. It was so pleasant to just hear him comfortably talk to his girlfriend about his dead brother. And then they went on their way and started playing. But we've been very intentional about sharing stories with Bodhi about his brother, about our family, constantly showing him videos and pictures, but also being really, really intentional about making sure he doesn't feel like he has to live up to William. A couple of months ago, he was in bed, and we tell Bodhi that he looks a lot like William because he
He
does.
does. Yeah.
He has the same hair, a lot of the same just facial features, his little shoulders. He looks so much like William, whereas Kai doesn't look like either of them. One night in bed, he said something to the effect like, I look so much like William. Like, you know, I am just like William. And I'm like, no, no, Bodhi, like you're you. You're just like Bodhi. And that's who we want. I want him to know that him as Bodhi is all we need. We don't need him to be William. We don't want him to be William. He's his own person. And he reminds us of William, and that's so special to our family. And yeah, so it's that fine line of making sure he knows his brother really well, and he knows that he has a really important place in our family,
Yeah.
despite what happened.
And the decision to try and eventually have Bodhi was never about replacing William. It was about we felt so imbalanced as a family of three. It just felt so awkward, and we need to bring more balance into our lives, and we wanted to give Kai a sibling, right? Because we realized that hopefully we will die before Kai, and so we wanted him to have somebody, a family member in his life when we're gone someday. So it was never about replacing William; it was about bringing more balance to our family and also providing a
Mm.
sibling for Kai.
As you were talking, I was thinking about, going back to William's Be Yourself challenge. And here you all are bringing that into Bodhi's life too, to say, like, yes, we can talk openly about William and you get to be yourself, just like he encouraged himself and other people to be
Yeah.
himself too.
Another really helpful thing that brings William into Bodhi's life is our nonprofit work. Bodhi's constantly asking when we're going to have another event for WBYC, and Mom, I love that you do this. He's literally said to me, like, I love that you do this stuff for William. I'm assuming it's because it's like an opportunity for him to connect with William's friends, because they're involved in the organization, and yeah, so that it's just one more layer of helping our family, including Bodhi, stay connected to William.
We've talked so much about the ways that you all continue to honor William's life, the impact that he had, the way he moves forward with you in your family life. I wanted to talk a little bit more about his death in the way that you all as a family decided to go back to Big Sky to see the tree that William hit, and just wondering, like, some folks might hear that and think, what? Absolutely not. That is not what I'm doing. And other people might think, yeah, I can totally relate to that. So how did you all make that decision and what was it like to be there?
So when we left Montana after William died, yeah, I was like, I'm never coming back. I hope Montana goes up in flames. I threw away anything that, like, any hats and T-shirts that said Big Sky, Montana. Like, it was just all gone. I didn't want to ever see it again. And everybody was like, yeah, I get that. And then a couple years ago, I went on a little mini retreat for myself. I went to Kripalu, which is a like a yogi center out in the Berkshires in Massachusetts. They have an outdoor labyrinth that you can walk, and you're supposed to set an intention when you start. But I didn't set any particular intention. I just wanted to walk it. I got to the end of the labyrinth, and all of a sudden, like, I was overtaken with, I need to see where William died. Like, it was this, just, it's like this huge feeling, because I hadn't ever been on the trail that they were skiing, so I had no understanding of where he might have died. I guess through the course of the first initial years of grieving him, at some point, my mind decided that it needed to see that, and so I was on this, like, meditative labyrinth, and it was just like this rush, like, I need to breathe the air that he last breathed. And I called Nick immediately, and I'm like, we need to go back to Big Sky. And he was like, oh, okay, let's do it. And that was like in the fall, I think. And I knew I didn't want to go back in the winter because I thought that would be too triggering. So we decided to plan the trip for June, because there would be no snow. The kids would be out of school pretty much. And it would be we were going to make this, like, this trip out of it too. Like, we would start with Big Sky, sort of rip the band-aid off, go see the spot where he died first thing, and then I would never have to return. And then we went on to see Yellowstone, and we went to Jackson Hole. Oddly enough, we were driving from the airport to Big Sky, and you make this turn up to the Big Sky Mountain Resort, and you all of a sudden can see Lone Peak, and, like, this wash of William just, like, went over me, and I was like, oh, we need to be here, and we need to be here all the time. I felt so connected to William, and I was was really surprised by that. I thought we would do it and then never have to come back, but I loved being in Big Sky.
Yeah. And we actually ended up going back this past February for the 6 year anniversary. We actually went back and skied. Well, Susie didn't, but the boys and I skied there for the first time since William died, which I think is amazing. I remember we were sitting in the airport. We had gotten to Bozeman, and there's all these people getting their ski stuff, and I looked at Susie and said, "It's not a lot of people who would do what we're doing right now. This is pretty, it's a pretty wild thing we're doing." But there, we do feel a very spiritual connection to Big Sky. I've been a skier my whole life. William loves skiing. I know he absolutely would want me to continue skiing because that was a bond we had. He would want his brothers to ski, and so yeah, it's a spiritual activity for us now.
And I sort of mentioned this back earlier, but there was so much left undone when we left Montana because we got out of there so quickly. And I felt like there was all this unfinished business in a lot of ways for myself individually and for us as a family. Kai had asked about going back and he had asked about going skiing for, a few years prior. So that first trip to Big Sky, I really wanted to just again see where he had died. I wanted to breathe that same air. I actually, when we finally did get to see the exact spot and the exact tree that he crashed into, I walked up a little bit further because I wanted to see what he had seen right before he died. And we also arranged to be able to meet some of the first responders that helped take care of him. I mean, when they found him, he was dead, but they did try to resuscitate him, and there was a whole team of people involved in his rescue. So I really wanted to talk to them and see what they experienced, and they were really happy that we came and shared that with them. It was sort of some closure for them, which I was happy to do. Like, it certainly wasn't closure for us. Like, when you lose a child, I don't think there is closure, but it was just this really important step that I needed to see where he died, to understand it, to talk to the people that took care of him. And then we had this added bonus of just feeling him all around us. He was in the trees, he was in the air, he was in the clouds. Like, he was everywhere.
Well, I'm going back to what we talked about earlier of you all in the process of the last, 6 years getting to this place of like, we really don't have that much control and how hard that is. And I just think of what came first, that recognition or going back to Montana. Because I can imagine if you were still in the place of like, we have to protect, lock it all down, keep everybody safe, like definitely not going back there. But I wonder if it was, if those feel related in some way for you.
I would say I think you're right. One can't happen without the other. I mean, if you don't get to that place of surrender, right? That we don't have control. It could be hard to go back and actually ski on the same mountain where our son died skiing. But I think I mean, I think, I mean, I know I got to that place. It had been a couple years, maybe three-ish years out. I think part of when I wrote my book, part of my processing got me there. That was some things I sort of spent a lot of time reflecting on and processing. About that, so I'll speak for myself. I think I realized that, and then and also realized another real important thing for me or learning that I took away from this is whatever I do from here on in will either honor or how I process this, how I engage with it will honor William or not. And so everything I do is in service of making sure we're doing things that honor William. We had this mantra, what would William want? And that I use that as my guide. And so that was also I decided to go skiing for the first time. I think it was 3 years after the accident because I just had to do it because I know William would have wanted me to do it. But I do think I got to the sort of the realization of control before that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think I realized, a few years after he died that this probably this could have happened anywhere at any time, right? It wasn't that he was skiing that day. We could have been in a car accident that day back in Carlisle. Like it was so random and so unexpected, that, it wasn't just because we were skiing in Montana that particular day. So I just had let go of the idea that Montana was the enemy and come to a place of, like this could have happened anywhere to our family. Not so much that it was meant to be by any means. It just was a horrible, tragic accident that happened to us. And now I want to make sure that our family isn't scared to do other things. Like it's really important for me that Kai doesn't feel inhibited to live his life to the fullest and make choices and sometimes take risks because you do, and sometimes stay safe. And like I want him to be able to do whatever he wants to do in order to have a successful and thriving life. And if we sort of close ourselves off and shut down and do things based on fear, that's not fair
Yeah.
to him and now Bodhi as well. Um, and and so I wanted to provide those kinds of opportunities for Kai to sort of, like it's scary as hell to do some of the things that we're doing, but I do them, like Nick said, to honor William, to move myself forward, and to show Kai that we can do hard things, right? We Even though we know that we're not necessarily in control of it all, we're gonna do our best. I never tell my kids anymore, like, it'll all be okay. Like, or mommy's going to keep you safe. Like, I don't use those words because I know they're not true. But I say, we're going to do the best we can. And, something like going skiing again, we're going to prepare our best, and make all the right choices. And we're going to embrace this
Yeah.
as our life,
Yeah.
instead of living in that fear zone.
Yeah. And I think you know, a horrible thing happened to our family. We didn't want it. We didn't want it to further inhibit our kids, right? So if we go around, trying to, wrap them in bubble wrap to protect them from every possible thing that could hurt them, that's not a life. So we were very aware that, that eventually and it was hard in the initial years to take our eyes off God. We went to the Grand Canyon. I think it was when was it? Like the
The one
first,
year
the 1 year
anniversary.
anniversary. I could not let go of Kai's hand because I was so deathly afraid he would fall off the side of that canyon. Now, 6 years later, we realize they're going to leave home someday. We can't always be looking over their shoulder. So we have to teach them how to be smart and embrace life.
Two threads that come through so clearly in our time together today is how intentional you both have been in your grief and with one another and with your family members. And also this commitment to continuing to have new experiences. And it feels like those two things come together in your new project that you're working on called The Greenhouse. And in our last few moments together, I wonder if you could share a little bit about what that is and what your hopes are around it.
Yeah, the greenhouse is the thing that I am just so excited about right now. And I'm pouring every bit of my work self into. The greenhouse will be a retreat for individual grieving families, families like ours who have lost a child, or those who have lost a parent. Because we were so, like I said before, we were so privileged in our early grief journey to be able to take time and have space to connect, as a family after our loss, and to have new experiences, to travel, just to sort of reset and figure out, like, who are we now and how do we move forward. And in your everyday life, like, you just don't have time to do that. You've got bills to pay, you've got laundry to do, you've got, mortgages, all of it. And we want to be able to provide families with that reset moment, that retreat moment, for free. And I'm from Falmouth, from Cape Cod, and William spent every summer on Cape Cod. So the home has so much significance, being placed, in Falmouth on Cape Cod by the sea, a place where he grew up. And I am so excited to be able to give families the opportunities that we had who otherwise might not be able to.
Yeah. And just a couple points to add there. When you're home every day, the reminders are constant. That's not that you're ever going to forget that you've lost your child or your spouse, but you need a break from the constant reminders walking by their room every day. Even being that family in town who suffered loss when everyone's always looking at you. So it's just we want to provide a momentary release and escape. We're not saying push away your grief. We're saying take a break. Go to a place where you can maybe be anonymous, where you can be in a comfortable place where everything's taken care of for you. So we kind of think of it as a free Airbnb for a grieving family. Our aspiration is to have 52 families a year be able to be housed in this house on Cape Cod. Again, just as a way to just take a pause, heal together, have some quiet time, do whatever you need um, to 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 keep moving forward.
The idea is to have no program or agenda at the house. People will be able to grieve how they need to and want to in that particular week. There'll be no prescriptions, no set groups that they have to or homework that they have to accomplish. If they would like services, they would be on offer. But if they just want to curl up with a family or take a shower and cry, like whatever an individual family and an individual person in that family needs, that's what we hope to provide in this retreat home. And we're actively in our fundraising stage. We're about 15% of our $2 million goal, which feels really, really great for our very small but mighty organization. But we have a long way to go to help serve as many families in grief as possible. So if listeners are out there and want to get involved, we would love your support. We would love you to become a cheerleader for us.
So where can listeners connect with not only the Greenhouse Project, but the Williams Be Yourself Challenge? Nick, you've got a book out there, My Teacher, My Son. Like, where's the best place for folks to go?
Yeah, our website is www.williamsbeyourselfchallenge.org or wbycgiving.org. It's just a little shorter. And I am on Instagram. I talk a lot about grief and William and family life. I'm at bereavement mom. I'm really leaning in to being a bereaved mom. And so I'd love for folks to follow me on there. And I also write a Substack. It's called Dear William. And I think I'm bereavement mom on Substack as well.
Yeah, and for me, for my book, if you want to buy or purchase my book, My Teacher, My Son, it's available on Amazon or in any of the big book retail stores, Barnes and Nobles, Borders, whatever they are today. If you want to learn more about me, I have a website called meetnickshaw.com. I have a blog on there, and any podcast I've been on is on that as well.
Great. Well, I will link to all of those in the show notes, listeners, so you don't have to scramble around to find something to write with. And yeah, highly recommend, Susie, your Substack. I really enjoyed reading through so many of the letters that you've written to William, and what a great modeling of what it's like to keep a connection with someone in our life who has died, and to just keep that conversation going. So highly recommend that, listeners. Well, Susie, Nick, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing William with me and our listeners, and just all of your process as a family who's grieving, as individuals who are grieving, as parents of children who are grieving. Just feeling really thankful for your time together today.
Thank you.
This was fantastic. Thank you for the opportunity I love talking about William. I love saying his name. So any opportunity to share him is so special. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you both again. And listeners, thank you. You make the show mean what it does. You make all those hours of editing worth it. So if you'd like to reach out to me, you can email me at griefoutloud@dougie.org. That website, DOUGY, is also our main website, where you can find all the information about our local programming, all our free downloadable resources like tip sheets and activity sheets, and of course, every episode of Grief Out Loud. I'm always excited to share that the podcast is sponsored in part by the Chester Stephan Endowment Fund. Grief Out Loud is a production of Dougy Center, the National Grief Center for Children and Families in Portland, Oregon. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you'll join us again next time.